Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? It is I, Mr. Wrathe, from Ibanez UK, and we're going to be talking about naming principles today. Sorry, I went to grab a coffee, and I've moved my laptop ever so slightly, so the screen is a bit different. How are we all doing? Are we enjoying the takeover so far? Any of you been watching the videos from Lee and the team over on obviously on YouTube and some on Facebook and Instagram TV? Anybody got any questions or comments about them that they want answering whilst I'm here before I start talking about crazy names? Let's have a look. We've got some comments coming in already. Oh, thank you, dude. Nice to see you. Hi, Tom. Okay, let's have a look at this. The Smelly Cats Jazz. Oh, I love that. That's a Friends reference, surely. Okay. Also, I'd be happy if you could buy Axe and Neck itself by itself. I've got big plans for my hardtail. Yeah, it's not something. Those kind of things is not something that a distributor handles. And I have to say, spare parts don't tend to be something that we keep here. I do have a link to someone who supplies some great stuff like that in the UK, so I'll pop that in a comment to you afterwards. Oh, and I've also got your first comment. It's made me after shopping around the Ibanez catalogues and realised they're descriptors. First letters of shape, last L at the top. Kind of. We'll get to that in a second, because I've learned something by looking into this and being part of the Ibanez team. The GRG 2022 1PA AQB. All right, well, let's get to it, because it's a funny subject, isn't it? Because, I've certainly, as the demo guy, for dealers in the past, when you get a guitar and then you've got to say it on camera, what was this again? The RG697852BCD in Borat Mankini spandex green. It's tricky, but there is a logic behind it. There's a reason why they have these numbers and letters for the product name, and it's because they have such a vast inventory, so many guitars, so many iterations of the same model or different finishes and all that kind of stuff over the years. And obviously, as a brand, creates a line of guitars and they expand and they are built upon, then that needs to change. And then obviously, depending on where they're made in the world, they want to be able to track that and also let you know where they're coming from. So there is a logic to it. Now, if you get a Fender, we're just used to calling them an American Standard or American Deluxe something. It's the same thing. But Ibanez are giving you all the clues as to exactly what the guitar is, just based on the name, which is, again, not always easy to ascertain unless you know exactly how to decipher it. So we're going to try and do that a little bit for you today. So if we go right the way back to when Ibanez released the Gem guitar in the 80s, out of the Gem, they produced a kind of derivative of it that was less, via idiosyncrasies and something that everybody, regardless of their taste, could use. And that was the RG, and it was the RG 550. So if we just use that as our example to work our way through it, RG actually stands for Roadster guitar. And they obviously, the RGs have changed a lot over the years, but that's where it comes from, Roadster guitar, so RG. And obviously, if you got an S guitar, that's a Sabre. They were the part of the Sabre series that came out, the very kind of thin-bodied ones. Sabre meaning sword, so like thin, sharp weapon. So let's stick to our RG story. So Roadster guitar, RG. Then let's look at 550. So the first number is the series. Now, that means it's 500. So RG 500 series came out as the kind of derivative of the Gem. Now, I have no idea, and not many people do, why it was called the 500 series. It just was. That was decided upon. That's what it's going to be. RG 500 series. And there will probably be somebody in these comments who can go, this is the reason why. So look out for that. And if I see it, I shall, learn something too. But that's it. RG 500 is the series, that first number. You'll see, like a 700 series in the late 80s and 90s, which was basically a 500 series with a few extra embellishments here and there. And then there was a 400 series. So the RG 400 series, that was a kind of a more affordable version of the 500 series. And they ended up moving production of some of the RGs to other countries. So it might have been an Indonesian-made RG. So they were great guitars, though, the RG 400. So they've changed the numbering system many times over the years. And certainly in the prestige and premium lines have taken differing forms as well. But if we stick to our basic principles, we've got RG 550, 500, the first number, that's the series. The next set of numbers actually relate to the pickup configurations. So let's say it was RG 510. That's a 10, effectively. So a 10 equals a single humbucker. If it was 530, then that's possibly a triple single coil or an HH with a pick guard. Both of those are extremely rare. More commonly, obviously, you get things like a 520. Now, the 20 is double humbucker with no pick guard, or a 540, which is humbucker single with a pick guard. And as the years go by, there've been different trems added to the guitar. So they all started off with floating trems, but then hardtail versions came out. So when you look at the final number, so let's say we've got an RG 421. 4 is the series, 2 is the pickup configuration, so that would be double humbucker, no pick guard. And the 1 defines whether it's got a floating trem or a fixed bridge. So if it's got a 1, it's a fixed bridge. If it's a 0, as in RG 550, then you're going to have a floating trem. Or you might have an RG 521, so 500 with that pickup configuration I just mentioned, and then a fixed trem. Sometimes, very rare, you might get a 5 on the end, and that means it's a missing single coil. So like the new Spot Run Genesis guitars, so you've just got a humbucker and a single coil. Those Spot Runs, they're super rare. And in and around the sort of 97, 98 year, they introduced the 7620, because that was the first 7-string RG, obviously a derivative of the Universe I was talking about earlier. So they simply added the 7 because it's a 7-string. So it's still a 620 guitar. It's a 600 series guitar with 20, which is double humbucker, no pick guard. And they went, well, it's a 7-string, put a 7 at the front. So RG 7620 is a 620 guitar, but it's a 7-string. Is that all making sense so far? I'll come back and let's have a look at some questions and I'll come back to this. I read something about the model number being based on price in yen. That's something I've never heard, and doesn't really equate. So that might be fake news. And there's some good stuff here from Michael, who obviously knows his stuff. So check some of those out. Any major news for J Customs this 2021 new colours? I think we'll find out soon. I've not personally seen any yet, but as soon as we are able to know it and share it, we will. Obviously, J Customs. Well, I'll come on to this later, but we will see certain models in the UK. You'll see other models that are very USA, specific, and some that are just Japanese only. That's the kind of beauty and curse of the J Customs. I'm still scrolling through. There's so many questions here, or comments that don't necessarily relate to this thread, so I'll have to circle back to some of this. Hey, I'll come back. Oh, there we go. There are some great wikis for Ibanez guitars. Yes, they do. I don't believe there is a history catalogue, but I think the guys who run the Ibanez wiki page, fantastic. All that information is on there. In fact, I will share a link. I've got something that talks about the sort of syntax at the end of, for finishers and stuff, and I will share that I will post it in here in a second. But those guys, sometimes I'm like, what is that? How do I find out about that? Usually those guys have got it covered. So that's a really, really good shout out. Okay, I'll move on. So I was saying, 97, 98, 7620, because of the 7-string, they added the 7. Around 2003, the made in Japan guitars were moved. Some of them were moved to other parts of the world for production, and some of the 500 series, well, in fact, the 500 series stayed in Japan, and they labeled them as prestige. So when you're talking about a prestige, it is a guitar that is made in Japan, whereas a premium will be made somewhere else. So when they did that, they changed the model numbers as well. So with the prestige models, they added a 1 at the start of it all. So if you had like a prestige 570 became the 1570, and the RG 550 converted to a 1550. So that's another way of kind of seeing, those 4 numbers probably define that it is a Japanese guitar, but you can also look at the guitar itself to define that. Sometimes there may be a 2 at the beginning. That's another thing to mention for special appointments. So it'd be the same guitar, but with a few nicer specs. So in the prestige numbering system, let's say you've got RG 1527. So the 1 is saying, look, this is a prestige made in Japan. 5 is still the series, so it's a 500 series guitar. 2 is defining the pickups, and then 7 is the 7 strings. And then sometimes you'll get prefixes. So obviously, as time's gone on, the RGs have been incredibly popular, and then there have been new derivatives of that. So we've had the RGA, the RGT, we've got the RGRs, RGIX, RGDs. So they mean something as well. So an RGA means that the guitar has an arched top. And you will have seen that. You can look them up online, find a picture of an RGA, you'll see top has just got that arch to it. The RGT means neck through body. The RGR is a reverse headstock, kind of logical in a way. The RGIX is part of the Iron Label series. So in the case of IX, it might be an ebony fretboard, or you might get an RGIB, which would be a baritone. And then you get the RGIT, neck through, as I was saying before. So that might be an Iron Label neck through, or an Iron Label baritone. So that's what the I stands for there. The RGD is a completely different body style. Well, not completely different, it still looks like an RG, but it's got more beveled horns and cutaways. The position of the switch is different as well, longer scale length, but still the same number system as the regular RGs. And then you'll get, some letters on the end. So you might get LTD, which is really quite obvious, like limited, obviously. DX is sometimes seen. That means deluxe, which is very similar to a limited. It's kind of more widely used in the 400 series. If any of you played a 400, or you've got one, or you're looking for a second-hand one. So, there's other things like M. You might see an RG 470 MB. So the M will be a maple fretboard. A B could stand for black hardware or burl top. So there are literally hundreds of these. So I'm going to post a handy list in the comments so you can reference them at your leisure. And there's loads of color codes, obviously. So you'll get, like I said, in the AZ24027-TFF, or the dash, and then the TFF gives it its color code. So you might get, LG, which would be Loch Ness Green. How do I remember all this? I've got to be honest with you, it's incredibly difficult to remember all this. And I was saying on a live stream yesterday, my mind is a bit like a a tube with a bunch of marbles in it. And every time a new marble goes in at the minute, one drops out. So every time I have to remember RGIX729, blah, 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 I wee myself and forget who I am for 2 days. So there we go. There's the answer to that question. The only other thing to mention, which is something different, is on the back of the headstock. In fact, I can show you on the prototype here of the of one of the AZs. I'm talking about the. You're not going to be able to see it on here. Sorry about that, guys. There is a serial number just here. It's more prominent on other guitars. That means something, obviously, and it's worth knowing. If you're trying to look at a second-hand guitar and you're pricing up, what year was it made? Whereabouts in the world was it made? The first letter denotes whereabouts in the world it was made. So in the case of that guitar, I know it's a Japanese-made guitar because it's F for Fujigen, which is the very famous Japanese factory. And the next two numbers define the year that it was made, and then the rest of the numbers are how many, consecutively, the number off the production line. So that's a really good way if you go in to buy a second-hand guitar. Let's say you're looking for an old Universe or something like that, and you take it off a shelf somewhere. You're at a guitar show, bring and buy job, and you pick it up and you go, well, someone's saying this is a 1998 Universe, and you can look on the back and go, is it? That's how you find that out. So I hope that's giving you some insight. There is a logic to this. There really is a logic to why they're numbered this way. I know it's amusing, but having some insight, you can actually decipher what guitar you're looking at, rather than just some random name that doesn't actually define what the specifics of the guitars actually are fitted with. One from Tom. Honestly, I find the prefixes RG, SIX, AZX, suffixes QM and MB simple enough to remember. It's just the numbers I struggle with. Michael's comment has blown my mind on that front. Well, there you go. It is that simple once you get into the habit of understanding the series and then what those pickup configurations. I was talking to my gaffer, James, earlier, and I was mentioning I was going to talk about this, and he was like, oh, yeah, because this, because that, because the other. It doesn't take long to sink in if you're an Ibanez fan or you've gone out and tried to find things secondhand. I hope that's been useful to you. I have been yapping on for about 20 minutes there. I know it's a bit dry. From Chris again, it's very impressive. I think we can appreciate how much work you put in and how devoted you are. Yes. Well, I am, and thank you. That's because I love Ibanez. Since being, able to choose my own guitars, because I started playing when I was very quite, really quite small. But I remember watching. I used to have an Aria Pro 2. My dad played in bands, and he taught himself to play in the 60s, the kind of Burt Weedon, playing a day. There were no YouTube videos to teach you how to do anything then. You put a record on, keep going back and try and work it out. And he was playing Clapton stuff. And so the first guitar I ever wanted to have was my dad's, I think it was even a Squier Strat. And then as you grow through and you get your own tastes and that develops, I remember being about sort of 13, 14 years old and seeing the Guitar Legends concert. And there were a number of those concerts, of course, but the Expo one in Seville, which was the metal night, there was nothing metal about it, but that was what it was called. And it had Brian May hosting the event, doing an amazing job. And then he introduced Joe Satriani and he introduced Steve Vai. There was also Betancourt on that. It was an amazing gig. But I remember being absolutely obsessed by Satch at the time, going, I just want one of those guitars. And then watching Steve and going, I just can't even comprehend what that is. I can understand. I couldn't play it, but I could kind of get what Satch was doing. Just Vai was just on another level. And then as I sat every day and just rewatched that video over and over again on my Aria Pro 2, learning how to play Satch Boogie, I then got a better understanding of what Steve was doing and then realized, oh my God, he's my new savior, which is why I'm just a total clone and have been ever since. But then, so as soon as I was able to buy my own Ibanez, that's the only guitar I've ever really wanted to own or play. And I love them. There's something about those guitars that are just so sexy and they're just a fit for me. So there we go. A little potted personal history there. Let's have a look at some more comments whilst I'm here. Has there ever been talk of changing model numbers? Oh my goodness, I hope not. But it does change. Things move on because there's new lines and that kind of stuff. So I've given you the very basics there. There are some exceptions to that, and certainly with AZs. And I mean, the way to look at an AZ from a prestige and a premium perspective is it's got 4 numbers, because it's saying, there's the prestige number. 4 numbers, prestige. If it's got 3 numbers, it's going to be premium. And premium came about as there was prestige under standard. And then as the quality in the factories in Indonesia and all over loads of other places became super high, real improvements made across the board for every brand. They thought, well, actually, we need to, create a standard series. It's probably got a few more of these nicer appointments. So, premium fret edge treatment, all that kind of stuff. So they thought, well, okay, somewhere between standard and prestige will be premium. And then sitting on top of all of that are the J Customs. Now, the J Customs, as I said earlier, every year, the really talented and wonderful luthiers in Japan will create some very, very exceptional guitars, very, very short runs of them, and territory specific. So we'll get some in the UK, but they're only available to us. Same for the US, same for Europe, and definitely Japan. Some of the Japanese ones are just jaw-dropping. So that's kind of the levels, and that's kind of the numbering system, but it does change. Oh, I better give a shout out, because at 1:00, Rabia and the captain are going to check out the 2021 RG range. There's some brilliant playing on this demo, by the way. You need to watch it. It is fantastic. There is also going to be on IGTV and Facebook, there is a demo of me with the new RG6 PKAG NTF, which kind of looks like the Red Beach model. That's divided some opinion there. Great guitar, great guitar. So check that out. Let me know what you think about that. I will return here at about 1:30 with the lovely and super, super talented Mr. Tom Quayle. So please join me for that. I'll answer a couple more questions if there's any, and then I'll sign off. If you're wondering why I keep doing this, it's because I've got 2 screens running today. And when you move the mouse across, it's just not following. So when I have tried to end a broadcast, it's got mouse is stuck over there. Danny, with so many options in the Ibanez family, is there a way to build your own spec guitar, like our Fender as a mod shop? I think that might be coming. There was certainly talk of that at some point. I have not seen anything new in relation to that. It'd be really cool, though. Let me know what you'd build if you had the choice. Okay, let's have a look. Any more questions? What goes into naming an explosion in the Scrabble factory? You're not wrong, really, are you? Here's a cool one. Can you think of an artist that encapsulates the AZ sound? Well, I can think of 2 very, very talented AZ signature artists that definitely do that. So Tom Quayle and Martin Miller. I remember it's been a couple of years. In fact, this time, a couple of years ago, we were releasing their signature models. And they, were very much part of the process of designing the guitars as well, part of that, design process. And so anything they do is the sound that I have in my head when I think AZ. But you can do anything on them, you really can. So I've got to click new comments. Matchless, there's lots of Laney behind you. Well, yes, because I am at Laney Amplification. Of course, we've got the Super Mod, which is the really special amp up there. 100 watts, master volume, underneath the glowing beast, the Ironheart. And then we've got an old, very much revered clip from our kind of, what was I going to say, lockup. It's not really. It's kind of like our museum piece. We've got loads of them. And now I've got my plant here called Robert and some Black Country Customs pedals up here. And somewhere over there, got the Ibanez on there. Get it rightly. There's the mini range of pedals. We'll be looking at them, the Ibanez ones. So yeah, love Laney. You should. Everybody should. All right, there's loads of comments on here. I will get, rather than me staring at the screen and you going, well, is he going to say something? I will end the broadcast here. Go and check out in 4 minutes' time the Ibanez RG video on YouTube, which has got the boys doing their stuff. And check out I think it's about 25+1 on the IGTV and Facebook. Me in this very studio with the RG6 in 4K, not this, whatever you're looking at now, 720p or whatever it is. All right, guys, I will try to circle back and answer any questions that are left behind. Thanks so much for joining in. I hope you're enjoying this. Make sure you're looking at what's coming ahead so you've got some questions ready, and I will try to feature you on here, okay? Till then, speak to you soon.